The following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Go Cowboys!
Let's go, baby!
Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Are you ready for a break?
Absolutely.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, and so much for that.
It's time for The Break on DallasCowboys.com
We were on the break!
with Nick Eatman, Brian Broaddus, Ambar Garcia, and Derek Eagleton.
It's Wednesday, March 1st, 2023, Season 18, Episode number 118. Welcome to the latest edition of The Break. We are live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star, presented by Miller Lite, the only beer of the Dallas Cowboys. Got Nick and Amber here today. Brian's actually covering baseball today, so he's out in Surprise, Arizona, doing a little baseball coverage, but we're going to hold it down today, talk a little bit about the NFL scouting combine. We've got news coming out of there yesterday. We'll talk a little bit about what Stephen Jones had to say on a myriad of topics. We'll also get to our series that we've been running through, biggest question Cowboys have at each position. Today we'll talk about the offensive line. We might get a little farther than that, but judging by how things have been going, typically two positions is about as much as we can get into a show. So let's start first with Stephen Jones and his comments yesterday from the scouting combine in Indianapolis. When asked about the franchise tag, here was his quote: "More than likely we'll use our tag, not necessarily on Tony, but we'll use our tag." That being said, we talked a little bit about with the franchise tag last week. Just to remind everyone, Dalton Schultz would count about $13 million if they were to tag him again. Tony Pollard would count about $10.1 million. Donovan Wilson could be an option at almost $14.5 million. Leighton Vander Esch, I don't think, but at least for the sake of this conversation, would count about $21 million if you were to tag him. My question for you guys is, did you get anything out of that statement on whether this means that, even though he said doesn't necessarily mean Tony, that if they're definitely going to use it, it's going to be Tony, or did you get some other indication on maybe the player you think it would be? Nick.
I love Steven, but I mean, he's too smart to be saying anything that you're like, oh, I'm going to read into this. I think they're going to use it on Tony Pollard. I think that's the only franchise tag option that's really in play. Now, you could say that about Schultz. They drafted Ferguson, and they have Hendershot, and they look like they're promising enough, players that you wouldn't want to pay $13 million for Schultz, who is a good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a good player, and I think any tight end that can get open would catch 60 to 70 passes from Dak, because that's where Dak's going to throw it. So, Tony Pollard at $10.1 million coming off an injury, that to me seems like the best one.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other player that just seems like it would make sense for them to be tagged by the Cowboys. What's interesting, why would it be a big deal to not want to say, like, because he did say they are planning on using the tag, why would it be a big deal to say we're thinking of using it for Pollard?
Well, only if they're trying to negotiate a long-term deal.
And that's the part that he can't talk. He won't necessarily talk about.
You think they would do a long-term deal?
Well, I mean, okay, long-term, 2 to 3 years. But the tricky part about a franchise tag is the minute that you put it on there, he's a $10.1 million player. That's what he is. And so that's where it starts. And so if you're like, well, we're going to tag you or we can get this deal done. But they're like, well, the deal's got to be $10 million a year because that's what you're going to tag us. Yeah. So if they don't really say it like that, they're trying to maybe, let's say, a 3-year, 24, like an 8 a year, which gives them more guarantees, all that kind of stuff. But I think agents always play that game of, if you tag me at all, that's where the floor is, and then we'll go up from there. So I don't think the Cowboys want to do that. Maybe that's why.
I guess that makes sense when you look at it that way. Would it be smart to do, like, even a 2 or 3 year deal with Pollard? What do you guys
Smart for who? Smart for the Cowboys or for Pollard? See,
for the Cowboys.
Well, that's the thing. That's what makes this kind of tricky for even Pollard. Pollard's got to look at it, too, and say, okay, I got hurt. What if I get hurt again? What if I play on the franchise tag and I get hurt like that again? Now I'm
with an increased load, by the way, probably.
Increased load. Yeah. Let's say he missed some time. Let's say he doesn't have the best year Now what happens to him? What is his value at 5? He's a 5-year player going into his 6th year. He's had a couple of injuries, maybe declining. He's got to say, all right, if the money is there for a 3-year deal that I can make $20 million guaranteed over 3 years, that might be better than the 10 this year. So it's a tough one for running backs, and I could see both sides wanting to say, all right, do I bet on myself or do I take the money?
Yeah, and on the Cowboys side, we talked about it last week. I would be afraid if I were an NFL franchise of committing long-term money to a second contract running back. And that's not about Tony. That's not about Zeke. That's not about anybody in particular. That's just in general. The replacement value for running backs, as we all have seen and have talked about, is relatively low. You can get really, really good quality at the running back position with not a lot of draft capital and not a lot of money. So if you're talking about roster building overall and how much money you have to save against the cap and knowing you got to spend big deals coming up on CD and Trayvon and Micah, this may be an area where you could save a little money and still get good quality production. And so from the Cowboys standpoint, I think they have to give some real consideration to, are we willing to do a long-term deal with Tony Pollard? No matter what we think of him, we might think he's a really good back and he might last all that time. It's more just a matter of what can I get for what I pay, and you might be able to get as good a value for less money.
Yeah, and I'm just never one that always says, well, you can draft a back. Well, I mean, yes, you can. You can draft a back, and every year there will be running backs drafted, and some of them will come from the 4th or 5th or 6th round, and they'll be productive. Some of them won't. And so I think sometimes I just think it's a little naive for people, the draft experts. I mean, Brian says it a lot of times too, and he's not wrong in that you will be able to find a running back that's in the middle rounds or whatever. But I think we should just not discount the fact that here is a very quick, fast player who's still tough. He's tough for his size. He doesn't fumble. He knows how to make big plays. So there's value there of worth signing him. And I think you can do both. I think you can draft. The guy that's getting left out here, obviously, is Zeke.
No, I think that's all fair. The one thing I will say, though, is I will trust this scouting department to find me a running back. What they've done from the standpoint of the draft, and really, in some respects, with regards to free agents, I trust them enough when draft day comes that they'll get me a back that will be a good back. I just trust that they will because their track record shows that they're good on draft day.
That's why the franchise tag makes sense. Because, like I said the other day,
right,
every time Tony Pollard has started a game, they average about 40 points. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's a small enough sample size to say maybe he could really take over. I mean, when he got some chances to start, he had huge days.
Yeah.
So maybe you should do that with him.
That's good protection.
We're going to find out
great
for 1 year,
insurance, yeah.
And then draft a guy.
That's exactly right.
And then we'll do a thank you graphic for Zeke when he moves on. Or when they
honestly, I just don't know what to think of that. I mean, you heard the comments. I still think it's very non-committal at this point, one way or the other, from Steven. But what are your thoughts on what's going to happen with Zeke?
Well, I wanted to ask you, Derek, because you've been very pro draft a guy. You talk about the running back cycle and how easy, quote unquote, it is to replace a guy in that position. Would you see a scenario? I wouldn't see it happening, but would you see a scenario where they just move on from both Zeke and Pollard?
I mean, it's a little riskier, but I would look at it and say, I'll put it to you like this. If the Cowboys feel like, and we're going to get to this in just a second because Steven had some comments about taking a running back in the first round. If the Cowboys feel like one of those 2 top running backs is going to be available to them in the first round, then I would be a little bit less worried about not having either one. Because as you talked about last week, Nick, either one of those first 2 running backs, if you plug them in next year, I think you got a really good running game. I mean, it's going to be about your offensive line. It won't be about the running back position if you plug either one of those 2 guys in. Now, if you don't think, based upon kind of how you look at the draft, and I know they do these mock drafts, internally to kind of figure out where they think guys are going to be. If they don't think those 2 running backs will be there, if they think they'll both be gone before they get to that point, now I do think that going to Nick's point, it might be a safer option for you to say, hey, at the very least, we want to do a 1-year franchise tag with Tony Pollard because we do want to at least have somebody for a year in order to make sure we've got an option. But outside of that, I would not be at all worried if they thought they could draft one of those two running backs and they didn't have either one of the running backs they currently have.
I really wish draft and free agency dates were flipped.
That'd be nice.
Draft would come first
be
and
nice.
then free agency, and then you go from there and figure out what kind of big money to pay.
Wouldn't that also bring you the opposite problem? Like, I know right now a lot of teams try to kind of fill in gaps with free agency, and then they get to draft and kind of know that they can kind of draft a lot of different things. It would be the flip, right? You would basically be trying to fill in gaps maybe with the draft, and then you would kind of go into free agency. I think it would still present the same kind of challenges, right?
I guess you
No.
I
No?
think it's different
I mean,
because of the
yeah,
amount of money
yeah,
in the
yeah, it would-
contract, the amount of money you're spending on players.
It would always be a different kind of challenge. I mean, it's just funny. I was as she was saying that, I was literally thinking, what if they were flipped? You know, like I was thinking the same thing, like timing. But yeah, there always would be something else that you'd have to deal with. You know, I mean, because then it'd be like, all right, well, who do we, I mean, it 100% would be issues, but I like this situation the way it is. I mean, it forces their hand to do something, and also it would be a little bit more creative for agents if it was the other way around too. It's like now you drafted somebody, so now I know we're going to hold this out, or you didn't draft anyone, and now, so it would be fun. But I mean, in this particular case, I definitely think it helps. It helps the Cowboys to say, all right, we're gonna do this with running back, and we don't know at 26. You just don't know who's gonna fall. I think if Bijan Robinson is as good as everyone says he is, I just don't understand why he would fall that far. I mean, running backs still get drafted in the first round.
But
they're
that's
special.
What we're seeing over the years is that I think they just don't tend to go as early as, like, I'll put it to you like this. Most everything I've read, Brian's even talked about it. Most everything I've read is if you don't look at the position, Bijan Robinson is, from a talent standpoint, a top 5 player in this draft. He's not going to sniff top 5. He won't probably sniff top 10. But that's also the point, is because, he's a really good running back, but when you think about just your overall team's ability to be successful, you don't need that kind of running back in order to do it. There are some positions that you do, obviously quarterback, positions like cornerback, left tackle. Those are positions where having that guy makes much more of a difference than having the running back. You can get look at the two teams that were in the Super Bowl this year. Neither one had what you would call a premier running back. And so there's a way to be able to be successful with lesser running backs.
Yeah.
And I think that's really more the key than is the guy worth it, like in the case of Tony Pollard. He's worth it. It's just, do you necessarily need to do that in order to be successful?
Yeah, well.
Great question.
What's
the right formula here?
If he's the first round, you think he's first round talent, Bijan Robinson?
Yes.
Okay.
Not even a question.
Perfect. If I'm drafting at 26 and I have a chance to get first round talent, then I'm in.
Sign me up.
I'm in, and I'm in for other positions too, But I mean, anytime you can get a first round grade at that point in the draft, that's what they did last year. I mean, even though, and I wish people would go back and revisit that, because everyone just kind of erases, these draft gurus or fans of the draft or whatever. They think the Cowboys, aren't going to do this or that, and they forget how much they just crapped on Tyler Smith's pick. They hated that pick. They thought it was a reach. This guy was, and guess what? He had 13 holding penalties last year. 13 penalties, not holding. 13 penalties. He had 12 at Tulsa, and everyone was like, oh, my God, this guy's got – yeah, well, he had 13. Got a problem with that?
I'm good.
I'm good, too. He played left guard, left tackle, left guard, and sometimes in the middle of a game, sometimes in the middle of a practice, went back and forth. Tyron Smith, ended up moving to right tackle because Tyler was playing so well. Okay. Flozell Adams had a false start every game, for 1 year, and he made the Pro Bowl. He was pretty good. So, the Cowboys.
Also, is when you have a hard time trying to find a picture of a guy that was drafted in the first round for whatever articles we're posting, you're like scratching your head. I'm like, okay,
that's a good indication that the
guy?
media is probably going to have a problem with the pick, right?
Yeah, who is this guy that has no pictures?
And what's funny about that? I have a story. In 2005, I remember going into your office after the draft, after they took DeMarcus Ware, who I was also in charge of finding photos. I couldn't really find a lot of photos of this guy from Troy State, and he's rushing the passer or whatever. The guy that I wanted them to draft was Derek Johnson out of Texas because every photo that I was searching for this linebacker, he had the ball in his hands. Had the ball. Like,
as a linebacker.
As a linebacker. And I was like, I want this guy.
Yeah.
And he was a good player.
He was a really good player.
But he was
in the
not,
NFL.
Yeah.
He did not turn out to be a Hall of Famer.
His jacket is blue.
Yeah.
Or burnt orange or whatever he wears.
Yeah.
It's not gold.
He probably got a burnt orange jacket, I'm guessing.
Yeah, he probably does.
Yeah.
Now, he ended up,
He was a long
he had
great.
some injuries at first, and then I felt like he ended up
He had a good NFL career,
Yeah.
a really good NFL career. He just wasn't DeMarcus Ware. You know?
But I just think that we should remember, how the Cowboys are drafted, especially offensive linemen. They've done really well in the first round. We also should remember in free agency that Dan Quinn knows what he's doing, especially with players that you don't think are that great. No one thought Jaron Kearse was going to be who he is. No one thought Donovan Wilson was going to have the year that he had. He's got visions for players, so he's going to sign some guy that played 3 years for the Jets, and you think, and I'm just throwing that out there. I have no idea what player. I'm just some player that you think, this guy's not very good. And we'll see what he does in this system.
Let's take our first break. When we come back, I want to talk about what Stephen Jones had to say about Tyron Smith and the prospects of him being back with the team next year. We'll talk about that when we come back. DallasCowboys.com radio.
Todd thought it would be secure to jog in the cheetah savanna. Todd believed the big cat repellent he bought online was reliable. And now, Todd is trying to be faster than this cheetah that can run 80 miles per hour. But the good news is, Todd has AT&T 5G that is fast, reliable, and secure. And he learned the best thing to do is stop running and toss her the backpack with the beef stew. AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure. It's not complicated.
5G requires compatible plan and device. 5G may not be available in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
What do you call a group of grown men and women with their faces painted silver and blue who get together every week to share a 3-hour-long ritual of jumping, singing, and toasting Miller Lite in 10-gallon hats while yelling, "How about them Cowboys?" You call it Miller Time in Dallas. Here's to the Cowboys. Here's to the original light beer. It's Miller Time. Celebrate responsibly. 2021 Miller Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
Want to use what the pros use? How about the official men's skincare brand of the Dallas Cowboys, Jack Black? Right now, you can get the Jack Black Starter, a curated collection of Cowboys locker room favorites for just $10 with free shipping. The starter includes 4 Jack Black skincare favorites, plus a full-sized intense therapy lip balm. Go to getjackblack.com/Cowboys and use the code word TEAMJB. That's getjackblack.com/Cowboys. The Jack Black Starter, $10, free shipping.
When you build, you start with the foundation. And home ownership is a foundation of a stable future. The Bank of America Community Home Ownership Commitment has helped over 34,000 people lay the groundwork so far, with up to $10,000 towards your down payment or 3% of the purchase price, whichever is less. The satisfaction of owning your own place can become a reality. Visit bankofamerica.com/homeowner to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America NA, Equal Housing Lender. Credit and collateral is subject to approval. Restrictions apply. This is not a commitment to lend.
Back to the break.
The most action-packed motorsports experience in the world returns to Arlington this Saturday. Head to AT&T Stadium on March the 4th for Monster Jam. Tickets are on sale now at SeatGeek.com, the official ticketing provider of AT&T Stadium.
Welcome back. Second segment of the break, live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. This segment is brought to you by Blockchain.com. Let's talk about Tyron Smith. Yesterday, Stephen Jones was asked about Tyron Smith. He was asked about the prospect of him coming back and also whether the team was comfortable with his contract situation. His answer was yes. What do you think Tyron's role would be if he's back with this team, as Stephen indicated yesterday?
I think he's a starter at left tackle. And I think Tyler Smith is your left guard, unless something changes. Like, unless they draft someone that's better at guard, or, unless Tyron's not one of your best 5. But I think that they would bring him back. Again, this is one of those where Steven said it, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't try to rework something. I mean, he also said something else in there about the competition committee and how they talk about linemen, and they say you can never have enough linemen. You just can't. And go look at, if you want to, if you're bored and you want to watch the XFL, go watch the XFL if you want to. and just see how many linemen are there. I mean, it's terrible. It's the same as the fourth quarter of a preseason game. Nobody can block. Nobody can. There's just no backup linemen. There's just not, and that's what the issue is. And so even when you get a guy like Isaac, you're going to
Isaac
Alarcon.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it right, but you're going to keep developing him, even though he is very, very raw. He's big, he's strong, smart, and you just develop him because you don't want to let go of any of linemen like that. I say all that to say I just don't know if they're just going to let Tyron Smith walk out the door. His salary is not that crazy. And
what's the amount that he's counting next year? Do you know?
Yeah, it's like $17 million on the cap.
Oh. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not that crazy. That's a lot of money, right?
Yeah, but that's your left tackle. He's your left tackle, and if he's replaced by a guy that makes $1. So, I mean, you're stealing with your left tackle of Tyler Smith, and then Terrence Steele, who you can just get him on a restricted deal, a 1-year deal. So, I mean,
right, but I mean that all makes sense.
So just look at the room.
No, I get that, but I guess the way I'm looking at it is if you're looking at the team, that's still $17 million that you don't necessarily have to spend because you have a left tackle that you have at left guard.
You'd
right?
say 5. I mean, let's
okay,
get
that's
down
what I
to
need
it.
to know.
You would say 5 if you cut him.
So you save 5 if you cut him. Or
I think you could save
million.
more if you did it after June 1. But again, to that point, and then get who?
Yeah,
and then
right.
somebody gets banged up. Tyron Steele gets hurt again, and now you're sitting.
So if you're thinking about it from that standpoint, let's say you're just looking at the room, and that's why I asked the question of what his role is. If you wanted to continue to develop Tyler Smith as your left tackle, is there any scenario under which you would have Tyron Smith be your swing tackle?
I don't know.
You said Tyler?
Tyler. Oh, no, Tyron.
Tyron.
I think we just swing into retirement if that happens. I just don't.
You think he'll swing into retirement, or you think the Cowboys will swing him into retirement?
I just don't think that's what he's going to do. But I don't know. I've had 4 conversations.
This is
By the way,
yeah. He's not a man of many words.
Spot Track has him the 23rd ranked salary in the league with left tackles.
Not bad. It's pretty good.
But either way, every year I wonder, at what point is it enough? At what point is it like your time is up? And I'm not talking about necessarily from the Cowboys' view, but also from him as a player. Like, I get it. He's a big, strong guy. He's a machine. He's someone that we always talk about it. Like, it's insane the fact that he still, when he is on the field, the way he plays and he looks, aside from all the injuries. But at what point is it that your body's like, okay, that's enough injuries. You can only take so many. So it does make me wonder. And he's been out here working. He's been working out. And I don't know where he stands mentally and where he is as far as like how long he sees himself kind of keep playing. But going back to like what you think his role would be, you talk about the amount of different guys that you plug in. And we saw that with the Cowboys this last year with how many times they flipped and moved guys around. But I think we would all agree that ideally you want to keep your 5 in the same spot as often as possible. But I don't know how long you can count on him. And I think I would rather start off the season with, it's hard to sideline a guy like Tyron Smith. But I don't know what his real role is. You don't know if he's going to get injured at training camp. You don't know at what point he's going to pull something and get hurt. He ended up playing how many games last year?
Like 5.
Yeah.
5 or,
I mean, based on his injury history, how comfortable do you guys feel with having him be a week 1 starter?
If he does, it means he'll be rusty because he didn't have any work in training camp. Because if he gets work in training camp, he'll probably get banged up. So to answer your question, I'm not.
But then your backup is getting reps,
right,
and getting ready just in case.
Here's what I worry about with Tyler Smith. I worry about Tyler Smith being Tyrone Crawford, and I say that as a guy that could play end, he could play tackle. Let's do them at both. Let's play. He never knows exactly where to put his weight at during the offseason because he could get moved at any time to end. So now he's going to play tackle, but then he gets moved out to end, and he doesn't get any sacks. Well, he doesn't have the burst because you had him at 300 pounds at tackle.
Or he's just not working at that position, getting better at those things.
Either way.
Yeah,
and so Kyle Wilber was another guy like that. They always moved him around and all that. Tyler,
but he has a lot more talent.
A lot more talent, and he's smart to do it all. I just wonder, okay, he could be your tackle unless he has to play guard. If he plays guard, and then he could move back to tackle or whatever. But are you leaving a Pro Bowler on the table by just saying, this is your spot? You could be a Pro Bowler if you just hone in on that,
as opposed to being a really good player.
As opposed to being a good player that kind of
around,
bounces back a little bit. That's the dilemma. That's why position flex sounds great when you're drafting, but it also can be a curse of a player if they just lean on your position flex all the time and never develop you as a full-time starter at that spot.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Stephen Jones pointed out, the fact that he's young and versatile.
Yeah.
Is that how you say?
Versatile. Yeah.
Versátil. And it just made me wonder. I'm like, gosh, I would hope that second year he has a specific spot where you're not moving him around just because of what was mentioned. You develop and get better and better at that position. And it also makes me wonder what's the best for the quarterback and the running game. If you keep moving guys around too much, I would assume, based on what we saw as far as like the struggles at times with the running game where it just wasn't as consistent or as good as you wanted it to be. So that's where I go back to, okay, I want to make sure I pin down all my starters at the right spot and go with that as long as possible, where I can now improve my running game with whoever the running back is.
Yeah, I just changed my mind in this conversation. I think probably if I had to think about what they're going to do and what they probably should do, I think they move on. Now that I think about it, because I don't trust that he'll stay healthy all the time, and it's like Zeke in the sense of you can lower the salary to make it work. But the guy has done so much for you. He is a Dallas Cowboy. He's one of your cornerstone players, or
he
has
should be in the Ring of Honor at some point in his life. Yeah,
and so they can offer Zeke a deal, just like they can offer Tyron a deal. But they don't want to do that.
Yeah,
they don't want to offer it what will really make sense for them. And $5 million isn't a ton to save, but you gotta have to sign Terrence Steele. Terrence Steele is a guy that is, he's going to get a big contract. They really like him, and he's going to be one of their guys for a while. So everything counts. You probably need another left guard. You do need a left guard. I mean, you got to figure that out with Connor McGovern. I mean, maybe McGovern comes back too. I don't know about that one, but I'm just saying, Tyron came back, but the problems didn't just get fixed, even with him on the right side. They weren't as good as they were with Terrence Steele.
Based on what you've seen from Tyron Smith's career so far, is he a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I think so. Because was he any different than Joe Thomas? Joe Thomas, only played 8 years. And he was Cleveland, and I think they look for ways to get Cleveland in the Hall of Fame, just like they look for him to get in the Hall of Fame game.
When they get one that might fit, it's
Did you see that got announced?
Yeah,
Cleveland versus the Jets?
Yeah, I saw that.
Because, I was thinking the Cowboys could play the Jets or they play Cleveland. I don't remember who told me this. Someone told me this, that probably not going to happen, that the Cowboys would get in because they'll definitely get in when Witten goes in. But that's still a few years away. He's still 3 years away.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But Jets and Browns for that one, for the Hall of Fame game. So
that's a hard. Sorry, finish.
I'm just saying 3 preseason games for the Cowboys. Yeah. They will not get the 4th game. You like that?
I like that.
That is a tough trip, man.
It is.
From Oxnard to Cleveland.
Not to Cleveland.
Canton.
You're actually going to Canton, yeah.
I always say that. It always makes me feel like a bad person.
Yeah.
Because it's not my favorite trip in the world. And you're always sitting around somebody, some young person that works with us that's never been. They're like, we're going to the Hall of Fame. And you're like, I've been like 5 times. It's fine.
It's okay.
and then, it makes you feel like, oh, okay, Scrooge, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Sorry, but then it's a tough, you go to Cleveland, then you bus over to the game, then you go to the game, and then you fly out at like Akron or Toledo, whatever we fly, all the way to LAX. And then you take the bus from there to Oxnard. You get in at 5 in the morning. Plus you change time zones and all that stuff.
It's a hard
Good
trip.
luck on that Sunday. It
is a hard trip, man.
But
It's
you don't want to discredit, like if you've never been to the Hall of Fame,
Right.
even if you've only
And
been
by the way,
once,
I
it's
would
pretty
have
awesome.
I would have liked to be able to be there when DeMarcus goes in, just because I kind of root for him. So that would have been nice. But that trip is a hard
trip for us,
so,
and it's tough for the team too.
Yeah,
it's another game that you have to play. You start camp earlier, which coaches probably like that part of it because you do get to have more practices and you start. But you still.
Yeah, but it's definitely one of those, and I don't want to sound ungrateful at all because it's great anytime you get to be a part of anything like that. But I think once you've been to it once, you're like, okay, it was cool. All right. I don't think next time is going to be as different as it was this time. So you're kind of good with one.
Yeah.
But back to Tyron Smith, I was going to say that for me, that's hard to answer because I feel he's been out most of the time that I've been covering the team, I feel like, with injuries. You ask about a guy like Zach Martin, 1,000%, absolutely. But then you look at Tyron Smith, I'm like, okay, how can I really judge a guy that's been hurt so much? And that's nothing against him. He just hasn't been in as many games. And I feel like in my time here, I've been talking more about his injuries than him on the field. And that's not to say that when he's been on the field, and I forget that year that we played against Atlanta, how bad it was. And they were just abusing Dak. And you definitely noticed what a difference maker he's been in past year for the Cowboys. But I don't know. It seems like sometimes some of these requirements for Hall of Famers is kind of tricky to figure out.
I'll tell you this, for a lot of years, maybe it was before you got here. I could have sworn it was some years after you were here. But anyway, he was as steady, just from a standpoint of always there.
Really?
And certainly from the standpoint of production, was just a phenomenal player. And to me, it's all going to be a matter of how the people that vote for the Hall of Fame view him from what you just talked about, from the latter part of his career where he was injured a lot versus the earlier part of his career where he was there and he was very dominant. And people didn't get around him. I don't care who you were. I don't care who the defensive end that was trying to go against. Like, nobody got around him. He didn't give up sacks. Like, he was that good. And that guy, I think from that standpoint, he probably should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, 8 Pro Bowls is a lot.
It is.
And one thing it comes up a lot in the discussion seems to be the all-decade team, which if you get into your career from 2015 to 2025, you may not make either one of them. But I think he probably would make the all-decade team. Or I guess it's already been out. I mean,
I was about to say,
did he make it?
Was he in the all-decade?
I don't know. I didn't
team?
really look. But 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
You would think he should have been in the
Joe
all-decade
Thomas
team. Yeah.
No, Joe Thomas is eligible now, so that means he must have stopped in like 18 or so. So he could be one. I think Tyron. I think he was the best. I think he's probably an all-decade player, and I think you could say he's the best. One of the best tackles of his era. So yeah, I think so. And to answer your question about when, at 2015 he played every game. 2016 he missed 3. 16, 17, and 18 he missed 3 games each every year, and then 19 he also missed 3. So he was missing 3 games a year until 2020 is when he got hurt and he was out the whole year. 2021 he missed 5 games. I mean, yeah.
What's crazy is like when you said
and in
3.
13. Wait.
Yeah, he missed like 13.
14,
12, so the last
12.
3 years he's missed a lot more than any other, and so it's going in that direction. But he was about 3 a year.
But even though back then you say 3, now it sounds like not that many. But I don't know. At the time, it felt like a whole lot.
Also back then, if Tyron Smith missed the game, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
Him and Sean Lee, if they were out, everything's going downhill. You're not going to win that game. So I think that's part of it too. But that also may speak to how valuable Tyron was to this team, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that 2020 season I just remember he was hurt in week 1, didn't play. Then week 2, he just kind of fought through it, and he played really, really well. And then the next week he went on IR for the year, with neck injury or surgery or whatever. And it's just kind of like, he was hurting in that game he played, but he played and he locked it down. I mean, that's the thing. He just doesn't. When he's out there, he doesn't suck. He doesn't. I mean, he could be hurt. He could be.
It wasn't a great game when he played that playoff game at right tackle, I don't think. I think that was probably one of the games where I've seen in his career, one of the very, very few games where I was just like, he was very average that game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Speaking of hurt, I know we have to go to break, but can I kind of take it back to running back for a quick second after we come back from break to ask a question?
Yeah, let's do that. And you know what we'll do? We'll do that, and then we'll see if we get into these our series. We might put off the series. Well, let's see. We'll come back in just a second. It's DallasCowboys.com radio.
The season is finally here. For months, we've been gearing up to win. Now it's time for the team that performs on any field. United Ag and Turf. With John Deere zero turns for mowing, compact tractors for loading, mini excavators for digging, Gator utility vehicles for hauling, implements for grading, hay tools for baling. United Ag and Turf, for winning. The official Ag and Turf equipment supplier of the Dallas Cowboys. Visit UnitedAgAndTurf.com for more.
Todd thought it would be secure to jog in the cheetah savanna. Todd believed the big cat repellent he bought online was reliable. And now, Todd is trying to be faster than this cheetah that can run 80 miles per hour. But the good news is, Todd has AT&T 5G that is fast, reliable, and secure. And he learned the best thing to do is stop running and toss her the backpack with the beef stew. AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure. It's not complicated.
5G requires compatible plan and device. 5G may not be available in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
This week! Did you get to work on time?
Yeah, but I just realized it's Sunday.
Little Sweet says head on home. Dr. Pepper's on its way. So sweet, unique. Baby, there's nothing better. I bet you've probably done something that deserves a Dr. Pepper. Did you invest your nest egg in an NFT?
Yeah, and I don't even know what that is.
It's a non-fungible token. Everyone's done something that deserves a Dr. Pepper.
When you build, you start with the foundation. And home ownership is a foundation of a stable future. The Bank of America Community Homeownership Commitment has helped over 34,000 people lay the groundwork so far, with up to $10,000 towards your down payment or 3% of the purchase price, whichever is less. The satisfaction of owning your own place can become a reality. Visit bankofamerica.com/homeowner to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America N.A. Equal Housing Lender. Credit and collateral is subject to approval. Restrictions apply. This is not a commitment to lend.
Back to the break.
Registration is now open for 2023 Dallas Cowboys youth football and cheer camps presented by Invisalign. Use promo code SPRINGBREAK23 for $25 off camp on March 14th and 15th. Take advantage of early bird pricing when you sign up for summer camp by May the 12th. Visit DallasCowboys.com/camps.
Welcome back. Final segment of the break, live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. Amber, right before the break, you had a question. What's your question?
Yeah, okay. You got a problem, Nick?
No, I'm just...
You're a little aggressive with the paper over there.
I want to make shots. Unlike Kyrie.
Well, I don't want to exhaust the running back conversation, but as we were talking about, and you missed. As we were talking about Tyron Smith and the injuries and all of that and the time being out, it just kind of led me back to thinking how valuable those types of players are, the type of players that can play through injuries. And it made me think of Ezekiel Elliott, how tough that guy is and how often, and people tend to not realize this. And you want to say every player in the NFL is dealing with something. But Zeke has been one of those guys that it takes a lot to get him off the field. And he's a very team player. You know, he's been great with the whole adding Tony Pollard into the mix and just being a team player. But when you look at these past few years and you realize, just talking behind the scenes and all that, how often he's been dealing with something, he's still out there producing whatever it is, amount or whatever, but the fact that he's still out there doing things, and we know, and I'm not gonna name any names, but we all know there are those types of players that as soon as like you pull a little something, you're like, oh, no, and you kind of, I'm not saying exaggerated, but you know, those type of players that are not like fighting and wanting to be out there on the field. So it is, I see so much value in a guy like him and the amount of times that he fights and wants to be out there. And you need those type of players that, despite what you're dealing with, are going to be out there. So much similar to, despite Tyron Smith injury history, when he is dealing with something, I mean, it takes a lot for him also to be pulled off the field, and he's still out there finishing games or whatever. So again, I wanted to rehash all of that, but those are a lot of things that I'm positive the front office is taking into consideration. And when Stephen Jones mentions we look at things that are not stats and numbers, we look at a lot more things that are aside of what's looked at or seen in paper.
Do you think that's enough for them to at least consider keeping Zeke this coming year, knowing that he is, like you said, he's very reliable from the standpoint of health. And even when he's not healthy, he's still there and he's still playing. Do you think that's enough for them to say that should be factored in as to when we make a decision on whether we're going to keep him around or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be factored in. I just don't see a scenario that Zeke can be the number 3 running back. So if you're not going to keep Pollard, if you're going to let him go in free agency, and then you draft a guy for sure, and then you draft one and you have Zeke, okay, I can live with that. But but even at that, what's he gonna make? I mean, would you rather put him down to $7-8 million a year, or just keep Pollard for 10? I mean, I think I'd rather have Pollard. I just don't see a scenario where Zeke can be your 3rd running back.
How much longer, if you had to guess, how much longer would his career be if he wasn't with the Dallas Cowboys? If he was to part ways and goes to another team?
He could play a few more years, I would guess, because that's the thing.
Maybe 3.
Like there will be teams out there that are like, yeah, we could take a Zeke Elliott, we could work a role for him. I mean, we see it happen with running backs all the time. You get a Le'Veon Bell who's really great, and then he goes somewhere else, and he just kind of meanders a little bit. You saw it with Todd Gurley. Like these really good running backs, they can go somewhere else and they can play for a few more years, where a team can kind of just get a little. And the expectation is different. As long as he's here, he's going to be Zeke. Mm-hmm. When he goes somewhere else, then their expectations are a little less because they know they're getting him at a stage in his career where he's not Zeke that you drafted. So in 2016. Yeah. So I think he'd go another 3 years, let's say.
And he's such a good short yardage back. He's a goal line back. And we saw it this year. I mean, it might be the last year of his career with the Cowboys, but he had 12 touchdowns, and he had another guy that was making the Pro Bowl that we were sharing the load with, but he still was productive, and he can be productive for another team, especially for everything you just said on, he's going to give you everything he's got. He's going to be out there. He's going to be, he's going to get his body ready enough to play. And, he sacrifices his body. Plus, he's a really, really good pass protection running back. So he's got some traits, like Steven was saying, got traits that don't necessarily, always work out on the stat sheet.
Yeah, you put him with a run-heavy team. You put him with a team that maybe plays in cold weather. And I think they could find a really good role for him for another few years. And by the way, that could be here with Dallas. Dallas could look at it and say, hey, we have a role for you, Zeke. We're going to cut the salary. He may be okay with that. Maybe he's not, but maybe they find a role that they say, we think we're going to go a little younger at running back. We want a little more juice, but we still want you to be here. We want you to be a kind of our short yardage, goal line type back. I still think there's value in him, but it just can't be at the price that he's been accustomed to being paid. And you kind of have to tear up that thought process of, well, as Zeke, we don't really want to give him a price that insults him. It might not insult him. He may look at it and say, I know exactly where I am in my career, and I'm good with staying here, continuing to live in Dallas, be a part of the community I've built here, and I'll take less money to do that role. Who knows? But at least that's something I think should be considered if the Cowboys are willing to consider it.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll find out soon enough.
We definitely will see. There's a lot that has to play out over the next couple of weeks. But make sure you check out the website, the mobile app. This week, we'll be covering the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. We got 3 of our reporters down there covering what's going on down there. So there'll be lots of content coming out of there. I'm sure Jerry will be talking sometime this week. Mike McCarthy's actually coming up today at 1 o'clock. I think actually it's going to be 12 o'clock here, but we're going to stream it live on the website and the mobile app. So if you want the opportunity to be able to check that out, and make sure you check that out. Until next week, for Nick Keatman and Amber Garcia, I'm Derek Eagleton. This has been The Break, live on DallasCowboys.com radio.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!